Ella, good evening. Thank you so much for taking time for joining me on the podcast tonight.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so very much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes, likewise. You and I just connected recently, and you kind of cued me in on some pretty incredible travel stories that you've had, and some probably beginning a lot younger than what I'd probably dare say a lot of the guests that I've had on previously had. So I'm really looking forward to, hearing some of your stories today. But kind of starting off, where you're calling in from today, are you kind of stationary somewhere for the long term, or are you kind of doing like a digital nomad thing right now? What's kind of your status on that?
That's a question I get so often. So my home base is in Dallas, Texas, and I've spent a little bit more time here in the last year than typically. But I do travel a lot for work. So I hop all around. Spent some time last year in Europe. I'm actually headed to Europe next month as well. So I do hop around, but I also have a home base. I pay rent monthly in Dallas.
Yeah, gotcha. Now, Texas is not where you're from originally, if I do recall. Were you on the West Coast somewhere? Is that where you hail from?
Yes, so something that you and I have in common is San Diego, specifically Pendleton. So I am a daughter, a very proud Marine Corps brat. And while I didn't live, my father wasn't stationed in Pendleton when I was growing up. I grew up going there often. That's actually where I got my swimming stress training done as a child. So very familiar with that. But yes, I'm from Orange County, California, a little north of Pendleton.
Gotcha. Okay. So you said that growing up, your father being a Marine Corps officer, probably having to deploy a lot, different changes of duty stations and things like that. That's just the life, right? So what do you kind of like recall? Can you remember like some of the places that you and your family were stationed at as you were growing up?
So I was really fortunate. I stayed in Orange County. So I grew up in Orange County specifically, but we did get to travel around a lot, starting pretty quickly. So I had a hybrid, if you will, bouncing around a bit. And I will say what I find really interesting was when I look at my brother and the differences I always say, because of how I grew up, home is where I lay my head. I'm very comfortable. Any pillow, as long as I have Wi-Fi, I can make it happen. My brother, on the other hand, though, because we hopped around a little bit as children, he prefers to stay put. He's not big on travel. He feels like he's done enough, so he craves his bed so frequently, and doesn't like to do more than 2 nights away from home. And to me, that's wild because I'm like, what? We were born for this. So it is really interesting. And I think we see that with military brats is that it goes one way or the other. Either you love travel, you can find anywhere to make it your home, or you really just crave that static place to go back to call home.
Absolutely. And just before we kind of hopped on the call here, you sent me a link to an article that you wrote on LinkedIn, kind of talking about how growing up as a military brat, I wouldn't say it's not to say that, military brats, as they're growing up, their family structure is neither good nor bad compared to like those who maybe grow up in a civilian family, but there are some differences. And, you kind of pointed this out in the article. So can you kind of cue us in on some of those?
Well, I was listening to your podcast where you were talking about your experiences with boot camp, and it would be erroneous for me to try to compare my childhood to a real boot camp, but I will say there were a lot of parallels, right? So when you're talking about having to do things down to the second and minute, that's quite literally the schedule that I grew up upon. So we had schedule A, B, C, all the way to F, and A was the most common, B was the second most common. Schedule F was something very out of the norm, like we were going to maybe a Sunday brunch or something. But this schedule was down to the minute. And so come like 6:47, my dad's banging on a pot going, it's 6:47, why aren't your clothes on? Schedule C. So we would wake up, lights on, schedule C, get to it. And we would just have to start going. And I think that yeah, that's absolutely different than probably my civilian counterpart friends and students at school. But where I'm really grateful for a lot of these experiences, and I think that this is probably a sentiment that you share, is it was a difficult time in my life. Like childhood is not something that I look back at fondly from a fun perspective, but I'm really grateful for a lot of the principles and tactics that I got as a child. And even though a lot of it came through adversity, I think that it really set me up for success in the long run. And I'm sure that that's something that you can relate to when you look back on your boot camp days. Maybe not the most fond memories, but you're really grateful for a lot of the principles that it taught you.
Absolutely. And there are certainly are parallels to what I experienced in boot camp with what you just described. And now, Marine Corps drill instructors and Marine Corps officers, as you alluded to, are like time management fiends. Like they are so good at it. Like, my drill instructors, how they manage to like funnel 80 recruits to like a classroom, to the chow hall, to here, to there, and whooping our butts like in the sand pit, like when we had time to kill. It's just they were time management masters. So yeah, that structure there was very sound for sure. But of course, that kind of led me to kind of think of like routines where it's like even to this day, and I picked this up in boot camp actually, and maybe you probably did this as well growing up, is that if I know what outfit I want to wear in the morning, I literally stack those clothes on my dresser next to my bed in the order that I think I would put the garments on. So that way, all I have to do is get up, get them on quickly. Because like same deal, when I was in boot camp, drill instructors would count us down. Okay, you got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, And so that was kind of like an efficient system that I still incorporate even to this day. And I'm sure probably a lot of those, you probably developed your own systems and routines that you probably still use today, I'm sure.
Well, okay, this is a little bit of a side note, but going on the travel front, because this absolutely affects how I travel and how I wake up and sometimes sleeping in my clothes because I know I have an early morning flight and I want that extra 15 minutes. So I don't want to waste my time changing clothes in the morning. So falling asleep in my outfit the night before, things like that. But I saw some murder mystery and like a real one, some crime scene investigation, whatever it was. And they had found that the murderer rolled his clothing when packing from city to city. And it was through that notion, and I'm watching this, and it's through that notion that they were able to determine that he was from the military. And I thought to myself, oh, is that a military thing? Is that why I roll my clothes when I pack? Because I didn't know that that was specific to the military segment of the population. I just thought it was the most efficient way to pack.
I do that too. Oh, okay then. Well, I don't know. Maybe I should change up the way I change my clothes. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, and it's just so interesting because again, I'm very much a civilian, and I have this weird, I think military brats, especially of those of us who do not enlist in any capacity, and take the civilian pathway, we're kind of this hybrid where we have a tremendous amount of respect for military values and what is brought forth, and we have a hyper awareness of the bigger picture, I think. And I think that that's why I wrote that article, because I would argue that, and of course I'm biased in saying this, but I would argue that a lot of the values that are instilled upon us at a very young age, that even some people in the military who are enlisted didn't get at a young age and are learning later in life, are these certain values around grit and growth and teamwork and discipline. And so we just approach, I think, the world and business and strategies a little bit differently with this idea of, okay, it is about the bigger picture. What is the end game here? And what are we going to do to make sure it happens?
Absolutely. And another thing that really kind of perked my ears that you told me about leading up to this conversation is that you traveled from California all the way to our nation's capital when you were only 7 years old, and you were on the plane by yourself. So many questions, but like, who, what, where, when, why. But so I'll turn the microphone over to you. Fill me in. I'm really curious.
Well, I find this interesting because it's only until you kind of look back, you go, oh, that's not normal, right? Like that's not necessarily normal. So if you're a frequent traveler, you may notice nowadays, but this was not the case in the 90s when I was a child. But you may notice nowadays that there will be a child with a big neon lanyard and it says unaccompanied minor, and it's very loud and it's letting everybody around them know this child is alone. And I remember the first time I saw that lanyard about 10 years ago, I thought, why are they letting everyone know that this child's alone? And I thought, oh, yeah, that's because children like me used to get lost because nobody knew we were alone. And then we're navigating airports by ourselves. And it was only very, very recently when someone asked me, when did you start traveling alone? Why are you, as a woman, comfortable and you feel safe traveling alone? And I started reflecting on that a bit, and I thought, well, if I rewind to my first trip alone, well, I was 7 years old. I was an unaccompanied minor. My parents, I love them. I'm grateful for them, but they were, especially by today's standards of parenthood, extremely hands off. They allowed me to fail on my own. They allowed me to have successes on my own, and they let me own all of my actions, for better or worse. And so at 7 years old, I really wanted to see the White House. Like, I really became fascinated by the White House. At the time, our president had a daughter around my age, not exactly, but, close enough to my age that I could look up to her. And I don't remember the exact conversations, but somehow I convinced my parents that I should go to the White House. The only problem was they didn't want to come with. They were busy. They couldn't be bothered. So they found a family, a complete group of strangers to host me for a few weeks in D.C. in Maryland. And so I flew by myself and I had a layover. So I had to deal with plane changing on top of it. And so yeah, at 7 years old, I flew by myself. I will say I got treated like a queen. I was first class and all the flight attendants loved me and were just fascinated by me. But in traveling later on alone, as I got older, not too much older, 9, 10 years old, I was lost at one point in DFW, which is one of the largest airports in the world. And my brother and I, my little brother, who was 7 at the time, was with me. We ended up in this room with about 200 other lost children of the airport. And I think about these kids a lot. Some of us weren't picked up because, like my brother and I, we were on a layover, so there was no adult to pick us up. We just had to get to our destination. We missed our flight for one reason or another. And I think about these kids. Like, there was a room at DFW dedicated to the unaccompanied minors. Where are they now? That's where I want to know. Where are the unaccompanied minors of the world? And are we talking about this very strange, unique experience that we had being children traveling, a lot of them military family children, children of divorce, children with parents who are in the entertainment space. So it's a very interesting niche, and I have not met too many unaccompanied minors. And I thought, well, I hope to share this story, and maybe it'll even unlock a memory for an unaccompanied minor who's now an adult and navigating the world, because I'd love to know how the rest of us turned out.
Well, goodness, when I was 7 years old, I think I was still slaying imaginary dragons with like a stick for a sword and stuff like that. So I can't even fathom back then, like, yeah, just hopping on a plane by myself, flying 3,000 miles to the nation's capital just because, so that's pretty amazing. Now I want to piggyback off of something that you mentioned earlier. You brought up the point about how some people asked you like whether or not you felt safe, especially as a solo female traveler. And this is definitely a topic I like to bring forth with the women that I welcome on my show, because, I have a lot of women in my life who, love the idea of going out and traveling and experiencing the world, but often they're afraid to, though. We hear a lot of crazy stuff like on our 24-hour news cycle. And so they're reluctant to go, especially by themselves. So it's just, yeah, as you kind of got older, was fear an issue with solo traveling in you and all? And if so, how did you kind of sort of manage that, if you will?
I've heard a few people's stories about their first time traveling alone, and there are a lot of people to this day who, one, haven't even been on an airplane, let alone on an airplane by themselves. I think that making the decision to get on an airplane by yourself is not always ideal for a lot of people. So I can completely appreciate the apprehension just of the getting there, let alone being there. I think for me, for better or worse, just because of the way that I grew up, where I had to be hyper independent, I've learned to, one, keep my head on a swivel. So I do have a bit of confidence in my ability to vet a situation for my safety. But I'm also hyper aware of the fact that I am a female and that I am a vulnerable person. I'm a trained fighter, but I also know that a man who's untrained, I can't compete with someone if they want to attack or hurt me, right? So I have a bit of a hyper awareness of my limitations as well. Um, I think the biggest piece for me is just doing a little bit of research on where you're going. Uh that will always help. I think that a lot of women and solar travelers in general, we want to help each other. We want to look out for each other. So I'm very big on everywhere I'm going, letting people know that I am traveling alone and in places where I feel safe. So for example, my Airbnb host, I want them to know that I'm traveling alone so they can keep an extra set of eyes on me. I'm not going to go to a bar and tell the random men at a bar that I'm traveling alone. But if I'm checking into a hotel, I might get two keys so people around me think that I'm waiting for a guest, even though I'm traveling alone. So, or even put a fake name, say, oh, my guest, Josh Guerrero, is coming to visit me, right? And putting a fake name for a fake guest just so anybody in the lobby doesn't spot me as being alone. So kind of picking and choosing who you want to tell, someone that you trust that's going to look out for you. The other big thing, and I think that it's so sad that I have to say this, but it's something that I've seen with a lot of, especially American travelers today, is not participating in any type of illegal activity. So, really staying away from anything that could put you in harm's way. And unfortunately, if you're doing something like purchasing drugs abroad, there could be serious consequences to that type of action. And sometimes we as Americans take for granted that laws are just handled differently abroad, and that we don't necessarily have the same protections that we do here in the United States. And so I think that for, having your wits about you is crucial and important. And I think some people just know that they don't have that. So they decide to take a step back. But I think that's a shame. I would hope that we get to a place that the world is safe enough that anybody can just exist and not worry about their safety. But unfortunately, we still live in a society where there are sinister people. That said, I do believe overwhelmingly, having traveled the world, that most people are good. Most people are inherently good, and they care about you just because you're a human being. I'm sure your experiences in the Peace Corps, you can corroborate that statement. There are a lot of good people in the world, and there are more good people than bad people. And so what we have to do is focus on the good, the peacemakers, the helpers, and not allow those very few bad apples to ruin our experiences. And solo travel is really a way that you can assert your independence and just reclaiming, yeah, I am going to be safe.
Yeah, I can definitely corroborate what you just said with some of my own experiences. Like, yeah, being in the Peace Corps, living in West Africa, is just, well, one thing I found pretty amazing about the Gambians that I interacted with, and this is actually kind of something I've noticed across the board too, is that the less that some people have, the more they're actually willing to give, it's like it wasn't uncommon for me to be walking the streets of my village or one of the other larger towns and come across a group of people sitting around a food bowl eating lunch, and then them trying to wave me over to share their food with me. It's like, I know they can't, have a huge bounty of that stuff, but yet they're willing to share it with a stranger passing by. And I don't know if you've looked back on this part of my story, but like 2 years ago, I walked across the entire state of Michigan, and I actually did it to raise money for a nonprofit that helps veterans. So that was pretty cool. But my very first day of hiking, I walked up to a random house and I asked the homeowners if I could pitch my tent in their yard. And not only did they allow me to, pitch my tent in their yard, but they offered me their entire guest house instead. So and they also made me dinner and breakfast the next morning. So this tired stranger just waddled up to their property and asked for help. And they're just like, sure thing, we got you. And so, and that trend continued throughout that entire trip too. So I would certainly agree with you that the vast majority of people like are decent human beings and who want to do the right thing and try to be of service to others. But of course, we can't lose sight of the fact that there are some bad apples out there. There are some devious people and frankly, flat out evil people too. So it's just, still, like, yeah, like you said, remain guarded, remain vigilant. I mean, you don't have to like rubberneck it out there and like ruin your trip through paranoia, but preparation is a very key part. And yes, that situational awareness too. And so like kind of like with like the preparation and the planning, like on this front, it's like, do you have any like go-to resources that you like consult with first? Maybe ones that are universal with like different places, or like how do you kind of go about that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me is I love Airbnb for that reason. Hotels, while they have great amenities that I enjoy, and hostels have a great value as well. But what I like about the Airbnb model is that, again, as a solo person, I don't need my own place alone. I want to stay with people, people who hopefully want me to be alive because there's a record that I was staying at their place, right? So there's a little bit of a synergy there when you're staying with an Airbnb host. And even if they aren't on property for whatever reason, which I've had happen where the owner doesn't stay on the property or, is at a different location, is they can give you the heads up on everything. So now you have a local with eyes and ears, and they're attuned to what an American tourist will expect or need. So when you have someone who's hosted an American before, they'll say something like, we don't have running water here, right? We have a septic tank in our bathroom. Americans are used to, sewage systems. Here are some of the things that you'll need to consider as an American. So I'm big on leveraging that resource first, because this is someone who is in the state. They are, or country, of course, and they have a vested interest in your enjoyment of the city, whatever your goal may be. They also have local resources, whether it's the police or any other myriad of resources that they can offer you. So that would be my first stop. I'm honestly not big on the travel sites because so many of them are sponsored, which means the moment money is involved, again, as an advertiser, I'm not saying that it's sinister or malice in any way, but the moment it's pay to play, now you can't be too sure that that option is the best. It's just the person with the biggest bucks. Yes, Expedia and various travel blogs are great, but I'd rather know what the locals say rather than what some sponsored blog post says.
That's outstanding. I've asked this question to so many women who've come on the podcast, and I have not heard this idea come up before, but everything you said just like really strikes a chord with me so much. I mean, because yeah, especially with like Airbnb, especially with ratings for both like hosts as well as tenants, there is a good amount of accountability there where it's just like each party, wants to bring their best self forward, obviously, for people to continue to stay at their places. And then also for, Airbnb, trying to think of the term, tenants, owners, I guess, sponsors, but for them to actually have people that want to stay with them too, or for them to, offer to stay there. So this is really good. I like this.
Yeah. And again, there are a myriad of resources online, but I think sometimes it's like drinking out of a water hose and it's hard to know what's up and down. So I'm just such a big person, even to this day, when it comes to the news and media, right? I don't want to hear about the news and media from American news. I don't, global news specifically. I want to be able to talk to somebody who has boots on the ground and can tell me what they're seeing from their vantage point as someone who's there. And that could be anything from, an earthquake or a terrorist attack, or even great news about what's happening. I'm always curious about the slant that our media has. And that's not to poo-poo our media. I don't want to do that. But it's just when you can get it from the horse's mouth, that's when the information is going to be a lot more enriched and a lot less biased.
Absolutely. A lot less filtered, for sure. So, like, speaking of which, this is always kind of a fun question that I like to ask my guests as well is, it is despite what we may do for preparing, not necessarily just from the safety front, but also just like, planning an itinerary or things to do, or, planning the logistics, flights, trains, whatever the case may be. I always say that it's not a matter of if things go wrong, it's a matter of when things go wrong. Like misadventures, they just kind of come with the territory if you're going to go out and travel, both domestically and abroad. So do you have any like wild misadventure stories, albeit not catastrophic ones? I'll put that caveat in there, but kind of like what we talked about is just like, we may look back on them a little bit fondly, even though in the moment they might have not have, been the most fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, touching upon the one where we were left in this lost children unaccompanied minor room for hours overnight. It was truly one of the worst experiences of my life. We had to sleep on a cot. It was freezing cold. I mean, all the kids were shivering. And we were packed into a room. Maybe 50 of us were left overnight when the flights had stopped because we had missed whatever layover and there were no more flight paths to whatever our destination was. So that was pretty rough. And I was just so grateful to have a sibling during that time because a lot of the kids were alone. And I ended up making a pen pal with someone during that time. Again, this is pre-cell phones, pre-internet, pre-email. And so she and I started pen paling, which was the first time I'd ever made a friend on my own, like out in the world. So that was a really exciting time, even though it was really painful and difficult and stressful. One of the executives at American Airlines got involved with our case because my brother and I were quite literally missing. So it was a while, and there was news recently of Spirit Airlines where one of the children had ended up on the wrong plane. And the internet's erupting going, how does this happen? And that's where I say like these flashbacks of these memories coming back to me. So that was a pretty rough one. I'll say another one that I'm putting out into the ether. I don't know what will come of this. I don't think I've ever told this story to too many people, but actually, no, we're going to edit that out. I'm not going to say that. I changed my mind.
Very well.
It's too bad. It's too sad. It'll take this a very sad direction. It involves a death. We won't go there. Gosh, I'm trying to think of when things I know I've had situations where the Airbnb wasn't ready and again, I love Airbnb, not sponsored by them yet, but I do love that. I do love them and VRBO as well. I'm trying to think I've definitely spent multiple nights in multiple airports. I've been snowed in JFK, but I think overall when these things happen, because they just do, and you have to be resilient enough to just roll with the punches and overcome adversity is planning for the unexpected. And part of that for me is always making sure that even if I check a bag, in my carry-on luggage, I have extra clothes, just so I have an extra pair of clothes for something, always making sure that it's extremely comfortable and light. Even if I'm going somewhere really hot in the summer, like I am in a month, I always bring a sweater because you just never know when you're going to end up in a air-conditioned room that is too cold to manage. And then I always have a pillow. So like I said, home is where I lay my head down. If I can connect my phone to Wi-Fi, get a charge, I'm good. And so knowing that there have been times where I've had to sleep on public transit, sleep at airports because of delays, unexpected, wrong turns, taking the wrong train, whatever it may be, just being able to find rest, I think is something that's really important. Again, always being mindful of your safety. It's not always safe to sleep somewhere in public, but sometimes there are just situations where you need to catch a nap so you have enough energy to do whatever the next thing it is, whether it's catching a flight, catching a train, and so forth. So really just expecting the unexpected. Another thing I would say is that if you're not a seasoned traveler, is just making sure that you have copies of all your documents, both in your phone, send it to your two closest people. So that way, if anything happens that you have to involve the consulate, there's a copy of your passport that makes it a lot easier to retrieve. Yes, they can find you by name, but having your passport information and copy expedites that process significantly. So just always making sure to have copies of your document. And it might sound like a joke. I don't know what your take on this is, but I'm big on having traveler's insurance. I used to be against it, but I've had enough negative experiences to know that, man, if I had just paid that $50 to protect this trip, I would have gotten some money back on this missed flight or whatever it may be. So, depending on what type of trip you're taking, this is for international, not so much domestic, but I am big on traveler's insurance. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I went to Israel a few years back, and I didn't get travel insurance at first, but then like a friend of mine that I was visiting, she talked me into getting it, so I did for the remainder of my trip. And I had a very, very close call that probably would have put me in the hospital if it had gone sideways. I was swimming in the Mediterranean. There was this rock outcropping kind of like out there, and I was snorkeling because I was just looking for like to see if any trash or like just stuff had just maybe hit the rocks from the wave action. Again, archaeologist, human, refuse, I take interest in that. And I ended up coming across this lone fish that, you know how typically if you come across a fish and they sense you're close, it'll just kind of scurry away and swim away. This one actually turned around and glared right at me, like fearless. And when I looked at it again, I realized that it was actually a stonefish. And stonefish, for anyone who doesn't know, is I think they're neurotoxic, but they're highly venomous. If that snake bites me and injects venom into me, I'm going to the hospital like easily. And so, and I was just thinking, I was literally that close to like, getting to ending up in the hospital. And so, and then I just was reminded, okay, I'm glad I got the insurance too. But, and also it's just, you just don't know what to expect sometimes. Like I remember the first time I visited Germany, when I landed in Dresden, I had to go through the city center to get to the tram that I needed to go to. And there was a huge protest going on. There were cops like out there clad in riot gear, and there were those big SWAT vehicles with the water hoses on top of them rolling in there too. I had no idea that was taking place. So it's just, yeah, expect the unexpected, really. And also the point that you made about, having your documents in order. So that way, if you do have to go to the embassy and you have those things ready, and some people may say this is extreme, but I like to actually get eyes on the embassy in the places that I'm going to. And it's like, or maybe even get my lodgings close to it too, where it's like I go to it, like before I go out and do all my exploring, and I just make sure I see what the building looks like. Where's the front entrance if I need to go there in case something pops off. So it's just, again, it's just, we travel these places for enjoyment purposes, but as the stories that you and I are sharing right now, things can go wrong. And like I said, it's not a matter of if they go wrong, it's when they go wrong. And hopefully it's just when they do go wrong, the craziness scale is a little bit lower on the craziness scale, but something's going to go wrong. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I would say that when I travel with someone who hasn't traveled often, the little hiccups like a delay, I sneeze at a delay. That's child's play. It just, weather happens, life happens, delays happen. But someone who's not seasoned, a delay can really throw them off because now they're overthinking the entire trip. Well, now I'm checking in late, or now I'm going to miss this connecting flight, or whatever it might be. And I think that really is overall a testament into some of the limiting beliefs I think that we carry, whether we know it or not. And so whether it's traveling, or whether it's starting a business, or whether it's archaeology, like the great work you're doing, or traveling the world with the Peace Corps, or joining the military, whatever it might be that is difficult, I think something that where we're really doing ourselves a disservice as a society, as parents, to ourselves, to our children, is we're making things so easy that when the inevitable failure comes, we don't have the tenacity or the resilience to overcome whatever that adversity is, whatever that challenge is. And I think it's such a shame. And when you have someone who travels often, it's just built into us. Okay, here's another adversity, some type of challenge to overcome. And I think that that's something that we are not owning in as much as we could. Would you agree with that? Because that's something that I'm kind of observing with newer generations and even my own generation.
Yeah, I do. I do observe this with a lot of parents. It's just, a lot of parents, and I don't want to speak ill of parents. I mean, I'm not one myself, so I don't want to be too harsh on them. But I mean, I'm just simply can go off of what I've observed. But I noticed that a lot of parents, they really want to be good friends with their kids, and they don't want to see their kids upset or, sad or experiencing things like failure and, being hit with those feelings that comes with something like that, or losing, if they participate in something or whatever the case may be. And with that, I noticed that a lot of kids, they don't pick up things like problem solving skills, which of course that's something that you and I both definitely picked up as solo travelers. It's like when you have no one else around you and something goes wrong, well, suck it up, figure it out. Right. And that's definitely something that I try to do with the children in my life. Like I was actually talking to my niece the other day. Well, she's not my real niece, but best friend's kid. And we were practicing numbers, and she had her calculator on her phone. And then she's like, give me a number, I'll type it in. And I'm like, And I give her a really high number. She's like 7. I said, how about 27 million? And she's like, you type it in. And I'm like, no, I mean, you said you were going to do it. So here we go. And I'm like, and I told her, I'm like, if I do it for you, then you're not going to learn how to do it. So it's just, and she tried a couple of times and showed it to me. I'm like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not either. And she's like, you do it. Come on. And I'm like, nope, you're like, you need to learn how to do this. If I do it for you, you're not going to learn how. And I want you to learn how so you can do it when I'm not around,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm also not a parent, so I'm not trying to harp on the parent. But again, even growing up, looking at my parents' counterparts, I saw it with just even my friends and how their parents coddled them. So it's not a new thing. I think that millennials have been critiqued for this. But really our parents, again, for several reasons, a lot of them being economic, they've shielded us as children from forms of stress or feelings of failure because they didn't want us to feel like failures that the way that they might have been being raised by the silent generation or the boomer generation. And so I think what that does, unfortunately, and where it's been a competitive edge for me, quite frankly, among other millennials, is that I look at failure as an opportunity to learn and to grow. Everything to me is tuition. Nothing's wasted. Cool. I learned a lesson. It was expensive. It was painful. It was frustrating, but I learned a lesson. There's my tuition. I am now going to move even smarter, even stronger, even faster coming out of this. And I think that when you don't have that mindset, at a younger age, I think it's a lot harder to acquire. And that's why I'm so enthralled with our US military, because I've seen the transformation of individuals like before and after, where I don't know what y'all do over there to kind of create this mentality of I will not fail. I will not stop. I will not quit. I'm going to keep going. Nothing, not even death, is going to stop me from getting the job done, from completing my mission. And I think that it's a mentality that I wish more of us, myself included, could really take on and glean.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people may not realize just how much influence they may actually have over other people without realizing it. And especially if you have kids in your life. And again, this may not necessarily have to be your kids, but maybe just kids that are around you, whether it's nieces and nephews or maybe younger cousins or whatever the case may be. It's just another thing that I found is that kids seldomly do what you actually tell them to do. They're going to do what they see you model. And so it's just So, and I really try to keep this in mind when I'm around like my, again, like children in my life, where it's like, I'm not just, sitting around on the couch, just scrolling away endlessly on my phone. I'm getting like workouts in, and, they're seeing me like do push-ups, like, on the floor, or, doing squats, whatever the case may be. And, they see those things, and then they want to take part into it too, and like start working out. Or, also just like how you, talk, and how you talk and like treat people too. Like when I visit home, my home is in Michigan. It's like, and my little nephew's over and I'm staying with my folks. It's like, hey, Uncle Josh is like, helping grandma like set the table, get dinner ready, mow the lawn, whatever the case may be. And it just shows that like, work ethic is strong in this house. And, that's what I want him to see, is just, and then that we all as a family, we contribute to like our livelihood and our well-being and everything. And also that, like, like you said, that we do what we set out to do and we get the job done, and and if we do something, we do it right. And because that was one thing that my nephew struggled with one time. He like pushed a stool like to one part of the kitchen to help my mom like bake cookies or do something. And I said, hey, before you leave, you got to push the stool back. You got to put it back where it belongs. And he's like, oh, but I can't do it, Uncle Josh. And I'm like, yeah, you can. I saw you move it earlier. You can do it again. And so he felt like he was struggling, or he was talking like he's struggling, but he ultimately moved the stool back to like where it was by himself. And I pulled him over and I'm like, hey, listen, I don't want you here. I don't want you to be talking like that. I don't want you to be talking like you're not capable of doing what you set out to do. Okay. It's just, you just did it. Even though you thought that you couldn't, you still did it. So believe in yourself, little man. You got that?
Yeah, for better or worse, my dad was always setting me up for failure. He was making us do things that were impossible. So if it was something like, move that couch, right? Knowing darn well we were never going to be capable of moving that couch. But no, I told you that was your task for today. Do it. And it might have been to keep us, to keep our brains activated, like, okay, let's come up with some strategies of how are we going to move this couch? Like, this is what we have to do. And then working together as a team. And then at some point, just accepting the failure. Like, we can't do it. We are incapable of doing it. We've thought of all the ways we could do it. I think at one time, in one of the things he asked me to do, I tried to pay someone else to do it for me. And I got in big trouble for that one, because he was like, no, we don't outsource in this family. But whatever it was, right, he would set us up for frankly, failure. And I think that a lot of my perfectionism and some of my less attractive qualities come from those exercises that he would put upon us. But at the end of it, he would applaud and say, I always knew you were going to fail. I knew you were going to fail, but you had the courage to keep trying. And that's the point. Accept that failure is a part of the scenario. Failure is not an option. Quitting is not an option. You're going to keep trying. And that's where the courage comes in, your self-awareness of what your limitations are. You just expanded upon what you thought your limitations are. And now you have the courage to try again. And I think that, again, I don't know that too many parents are willing to set their children up for failure. That sounds terrible when you look at it on a micro level. But when you think about what you're teaching them, when you're letting them win or you're making it easier for them, it really isn't setting them up for, to have that awareness and courage and independence to try those things beyond their capabilities so they could really see what their limitations are.
Well, and of course, failure is just going to be part of any journey in life, whether that's like in the realms of dating or in business or in your job, or, just pick your path. You're gonna hit failure. That's just part of the deal. And unfortunately, in this day and age, especially in the realms of social media, I think there's kind of sort of this disillusion around failure, because we see the highlight reels of people's lives on social media, right? And we see those who are like CEOs of companies or like whatever the case may be, those who have found massive success in their life. And the perception that a lot of people have when they view those types of profiles is that, oh, he or she is an overnight success, or she got lucky, or whatever the case may be. It's just, Well, that overnight success that you are talking about took that person 20 years. And I'm sure like they have like a list like a kilometer long of how many times they failed to get to the point where they are right now. But, the X factor in that whole equation is that they kept going regardless of the failure. They took those lessons, they learned from those mistakes, they tried not to make them again. And they try to do something differently than what led to the mistake in the first place. After all, that's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So it's just, yeah, that's definitely something that I hope people can take away from this conversation as well. Is just that, no one's an overnight success, like in anything, really. It's just, if you want to achieve something in your life, be ready to be in it for the long haul and be ready to fail a lot along the way, because it's just going to happen. That's just the way it is. Deal with it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, Michael Jordan said it recently in an interview, and I thought it was so poignant and so beautiful. He goes, everyone talks about my championships and they talk about all of these accolades that I've acquired through my basketball career, but nobody talks about the fact that I've missed over 9,000 shots. People miss that part. Nobody, they talk about the winning shot. They talk about the winning, but they don't talk about how many times I failed and I came back. And we know it, right? We know that he was cut from teams. We know that he was overlooked so many times in the beginning. And so while we can celebrate and laud his status as, I'm gonna say it, the greatest of all time, because I still stand by that and believe it. No offense to any Angelinos that listen, but I think that, Michael Jordan's story is so beautiful. And I don't know that we're even giving ourselves a chance to miss those 9,000 shots so we can get that championship on the other side. And so I struggle with that. Again, my perfectionist, I allow myself to amputate my efforts because I'll stop myself in my tracks because I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do it perfectly, so I don't want to do it at all.
Right. Well, and then another thing with Michael Jordan is that, he was willing to do what a lot of players like were not. He would show up to practices like before everyone. He would get off the court after everyone else had already left. And of course he's doing like strength training and all kinds of other stuff like, on the side. Like even the point of just like he had the idea of just even getting bigger biceps, like created like a psychological factor amongst the other players if he goes in there and just appears more opposing than them too. That helped him. Like he was doing all these things that so many other players weren't willing to do at the time to try and gain an edge. And no wonder the man was a champion, because like, he was just willing to, take all those like extra steps. And sometimes that's what it takes as well, is like, you have to be willing to do or to achieve the things that others will not. You have to be willing to do the things that others don't,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All righty. So, what do you have on the horizon for this year? Do you have any travels in the works for the remainder of 2024?
I do. I'm actually in the middle of a book tour. I wrote a book that released late last year, and it became a bestseller on multiple lists, and I feel very, very grateful and fortunate for that. So I have the opportunity to travel with my book, which is a whole different type of travel beast.
I bet.
Because a lot of people say work or pleasure, right? Are you traveling for work or pleasure? And I'm like, I don't know what you call this. Just talking about this book that I wrote. It's a book called High Tolerance, and it's about some of the insider tricks, tips, insights of alcohol marketing in the United States, and just add some context to a very complex discussion. So I feel really grateful that I get to do that. And then I am taking a wonderful vacation hopping around Europe. I'll be going this summer to hop around Europe. I did something similar last year, different destinations, but I don't typically say where I'm going to go or when I'm going to go out of a safety concern.
Sure, yeah. I mean, based on what we talked about today.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. I don't like to say exactly when I'll be out of town until after I come back. Then I post everything on my social media is latergram. But I feel very fortunate that I will be able to visit Europe again and just enjoy some time in the sun, time on the water, and do a little island hopping. So I'm really excited about that. And then I actually plan on going to Oaxaca later this year. My birthday is around Halloween. And in the Mexican culture, my mother was born in Mexico. In the Mexican culture, we have this beautiful celebration after Halloween called Dia de los Muertos. And I get to celebrate in Oaxaca and have a very traditional DDLM, we call it. So I have some trips on the horizon and I'm really grateful. Some are solo, some are not. I like to mix it up. Usually, I don't know if you find this when you go on group trips, but I really struggle going on a group trip if I'm not the one planning everything. Do you have that control freak issue?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, in one regard, it is kind of nice to not really have to do any of the grunt work leading up to the trip. You can just hop on the trip and kind of enjoy it. But it's just like there is kind of a bummer behind it though, where it's just like if there was a certain something that you wanted to do or you wanted to see and it wasn't woven into the, itinerary. And you kind of wish that maybe you were able to plug that in there somehow. So pros and cons to group trips is what I found.
Oh gosh, I'm such a control freak. It doesn't matter who the group is. I'm like, hi, my name is Ella and I'm taking over. It's kind of how I approach business too. Hi, thank you for handing me your business. I'm about to take over. But yeah, I do struggle with that a little bit. So if anybody ever does a trip with me, just be prepared. I have a lot of research at hand, but it's because I've been traveling for so long, right? So it's getting a little bit harder to find areas that I haven't enjoyed yet. I will say, and I think I forget if you've been here, but I've never been to Asia. That's a place that I have not yet been to. So I'm really excited about that because I know it's an entirely different space, culture, and so forth. But my options are getting a little bit more limited in the sense of, okay, I don't want to say been there, done that, because there are almost 200 countries, nations in the world, and I certainly haven't touched half of them, a quarter of them. But I don't know if you feel this way sometimes, where it's like, okay, this feels very similar. This feels like this place, or this reminds me of that place. And I've certainly felt that redundancy sometimes traveling, which is also beautiful because it shows how connected we are.
Yeah, a friend of mine had the term traveling around Europe, ABC, another bloody cathedral, another bloody castle, another bloody chateau, or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, obviously each one is unique in their own right. Yeah, for sure. But it's just, I'm not going to say that, if you've been to one, European country, you've been to them all. But I know what you mean, though. But now, in regards to Asia, actually, the first country that I visited outside of the U.S. Well, I'm from Michigan, so I don't count Canada. I mean, Canada is just like right across the bridge from me, so I don't really count it as a foreign country necessarily. But I went to Japan. That was the first country that I've been to, and to this day, it still remains my favorite. Like everything from the culture, the people there were just absolutely amazing. And the food, my gosh, I was in hog heaven with all the amazing food that was served there, all like fresh food as well. And just how chill all the cities were. I mean, there was a good amount of hustle and bustle, like there, because there was a lot of people there. They're very populated cities, but I still didn't feel like overwhelmed. Like no one's like trying to get to where they wanted to go at the expense of anyone else, if that makes sense. So it's something very chill. And then, if I purchased something from someone's shop, they would just gleefully smile and they would bow like after our transaction's done. And it was so cool. So I don't know where you're planning on going to Asia just yet, but if Japan is on your list, you're going to have an amazing time. I can tell you that much.
Oh gosh. So on the note of my perfectionism, of like, if I can't do it perfect, I don't want to do it at all, which again, I have to overcome that limiting belief, but that has been one of my approaches with Japan. So I talk about it, the reason why in my book, and it's because of some experiences in my childhood with an exchange program with Japanese students growing up, but Japan has always been number one on my list. And one of the reasons why I have not gone yet is because in my head, if I can't do it the way a multimillionaire would do it, then I don't want to do it. I want to go without a budget. I want to do it all. I want to do all the spas. I want to do the business pods. I want to have all the best sushi. I want to try the blowfish. Like, I want to do Japan, all the like several cities, right? And the historical, there's just so much I want to see and do. And then I tell myself, well, if I can't do it all, then I'm not going to plan it. And I have to let that go and just go for it and accept that it might be a few trips. Because unless I live there, experiencing everything I hope to experience is probably not going to happen. So I appreciate you. Of all the countries you could have said, Japan is the one my heart truly craves. And so you're compelling me to really just make it happen already.
Well, when I went, I will also tell you this. I was in undergrad, and I went there on a faculty-led study abroad, so broke college student traveling to Japan, and went to 7 different cities over the course of like 2 weeks. And pretty much a lot of the food stuff that we have wasn't like the high-end stuff, I guess, as you put it. But I'll tell you, like, one of my first culinary experiences that I had there in the city of Osaka, that's the city that we had flown into. We went out for dinner one night, and my professor that was leading the trip, who I called Sensei, he takes us down this like alleyway that's like looks kind of sketchy. And I'm like, all right, is something about to go down here? I mean, what's going on? Why are we walking down this alleyway? And then Sensei goes up to like what seems to be like just this dark, pale, like gray wall. And he like slides a door open, and inside is an okonomiyaki restaurant. And if you don't know what okonomiyaki is, I will encourage you to look it up. It's amazing. And like this restaurant was so squared away, like so clean. Like all these cooks were using like locally sourced ingredients. And so that was probably my favorite culinary experience during the entire trip, because it was so unusual. Like I said, we're walking down like kind of this sketchy alley, and then suddenly like you slide open a door, there's a really, really nice restaurant inside. And my gosh, the food was so delicious. And so sometimes it's like, I mean, yeah, we can splurge on very like, fancy meals and pretty like high end restaurants that probably really cater to tourists. But I felt like this is like a local experience. Like locals would come to a place like this and like, enjoy the food, maybe interact with like the chefs and everything like that. So it just felt very authentic to me. So, so I would say that probably if you do go to Japan, I think moments like that will probably surprise you a little bit more so, I would say.
I love that. Thank you so much for that vote of confidence. I mean it. When I book the trip, I'll have to reach out to you and get some of your tips, because even though a few things may have changed since you visited, I would love any insights you have, because it will be a complete dream come true.
Well, absolutely. Well, I certainly have no issue going down memory lane on that front, as you can tell. So by all means, for sure. So I haven't asked you yet about like what you do as a marketer. You also kind of filled me in that's kind of what you do. And it sounds like it kind of allows you the opportunity to travel as you will, even though you do have a home base like we discussed. So yeah, kind of tell us a little bit about, your marketing business.
Yes, I'm the founding partner of EP Consulting, which was born out of really necessity from a few brands. So my background, as I mentioned through my book High Tolerance, is in alcohol marketing, beverage marketing. So I have worked with several of the largest alcohol beverage companies in the world. And that could be anything from the sales and marketing side, trade marketing, media, advertising, social media, that type of work. So anything within that space. And then furthermore, the innovation. So creating the bottles, picking the labels for the bottles, picking silver or gold in terms of the font and so forth. But really just making sure that these products are marketed both in a responsible way, but in a way that is consumer centric, and then creating sales and marketing tactics to drive more business. Where my business is transforming a little bit in recent in recent years is that I'm really working with executive leaders who just need a better grip on some of the gaps within their business. So that could be from a distribution gap, that could be from a leadership gap perspective, a technological gap, making sure that whatever it is you're building it to scale. And because I have experience with several Fortune 500 companies and I've had very big marketing dollars and research dollars, data, and so forth, I'm able to take a lot of the lessons and strategies that I've learned at a higher level and then apply them to smaller businesses to empower leaders to unlock various strategies and really just keys to driving new incremental business. So it's been really exciting. Working for yourself is a different beast, but I'm really grateful for it. And yes, it has afforded me the opportunity to travel, to meet with business partners around the world. That's been really exciting. And I think my first business trip was when I was 18 years old. And my mother said to me at the time, she was like, your life is never going to be the same. Like this is it. You're gonna fall in love. Like you got bit by the bug. And that's exactly what happened. So even while I was studying in undergrad, I was traveling for work. And that's where I got the confidence to travel alone because I didn't really have a choice. I had a meeting to go to, so I had to get there. And that meant going alone on behalf of my team. So I'm really grateful for the experiences I've had. And I think the vantage point of being in sales and marketing is that it's such an innovative space that you're just constantly learning, so you can be on top of your game and really, again, just help empower leaders who need that extra boost of, quite frankly, confidence. We can have all the tactics and strategies in the world to build a brand or build a business, but sometimes we just need a sounding board of someone who can say, yes, this is a good idea, or no, it's not the best idea, and here's what we're going to do to work on it a little bit in a safe space with someone who has your priorities in mind versus like, a boss or a board member who might give you a harder time because they have their own priorities. And so by partnering with me, I can help business leaders know, like, no, your priorities are my priorities, and I'm going to support the people behind the product. So it's been awesome. It's been great, but it's so different working for yourself. Like that's just next level. So I'm still getting a grip on it because I've only been doing it about a year now, officially. So
Outstanding. Now, marketing is definitely not a space that I, ventured into very much. However, I do find that just as I go out through my life, and of course, as I do this podcast, marketing skills are very applicable in like anything. I mean, obviously, it's like I have to market myself to a prospective guest to see if they'd be willing to come on my show. It's just like in like the realms of like, dating, especially with me right now as a single guy, I have to market myself to, hopefully attract some dates. And with even in like, my career, like finding jobs, I have to market myself as an archaeologist that hopefully people would consider me over others, like, in jobs. So kind of like going along with that, would you have like, let's say, maybe I'll whittle it down to like a top three. And I guess maybe the term I'll use is principles, like maybe like marketing principles that would help people find success in the realms of business, like you discussed, but maybe even on like those more personal levels. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm articulating that question too well.
No, that's absolutely perfect. And that's exactly where I built my business comes in, is because a lot of times we are so focused on the business side of marketing that we forget that there is such a personal side to it as well. I do want to give you a shout out before I answer that I love your podcast intro. It's the best podcast intro I've ever heard. And I mean that wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
It's incredible. The production, the voice, the song, it makes me want to beat my chest and like wear some leaves or like dress like Jane, Tarzan's Jane or something, and go hop in a jungle with George of the Jungle and King Kong and Donkey Kong and all the Kongs. Like I love that intro. And whether people know it or not, that in and of itself is marketing. You are establishing yourself as someone who takes this podcast seriously, who has the skills to create a production clip like that, because I could tell you right now with my production experience, I would not be able to do that unless I'm copying someone else and ripping it. But like I wouldn't be able to create something like that myself the way that you did. So seriously, bravo. And really incredible work. But I think that you're touching upon something that is really important and a passion point for me, which is the idea of personal branding and marketing. And this is something that all leaders really need to have at the forefront with everything they're doing, even if they're a CTO. So I've worked with people in the finance space that really undervalue the importance of marketing from a personal branding standpoint. And I think that a lot of the principles that go into business marketing and personal branding really align. So the first is going to make sure that you are resonating with your audience with a relevant message, whatever that message may be. So whether the message is, hey, I have a podcast and I take it seriously and I'm someone who puts my all in everything I do, great. Whatever your message may be, that's what you want at the forefront. And so it's really important that in whatever it is that you're deciding to do and put yourself out there, that you're picking something that's going to resonate with your audience. I think the second one in terms of marketing that really gets overlooked, and I have to have these conversations with brand owners of multi-million-dollar brands that have completely overlooked this part. So I understand why we forget to do it, but you got to have a mission statement. You have to have missions and values and look at why do you do whatever it is you do? What is your why? And we hear that a lot in entrepreneurship, but it gets so overlooked. And those core values are going to carry into whatever your marketing message is on the outfront, on the output. So making sure that you really have a narrowed focus on what your mission is. Again, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's creating a product, creating a podcast, creating a website, creating a resume. What is your mission? What are your values? Make it clear. And then I think the third would be authentically yourself. When you are authentic with your message, whatever it is, right? You may tailor it for your audience and so forth as you best see fit. But when you are authentic with your message, you don't have to worry about whether it's going to age well. Because as long as you stay authentic and true to, again, your values, point number 2, you don't have to worry, because what you're going to do is you're going to attract the people who need your voice, who need whatever it is, your skill set and so forth. And furthermore, which some of us don't want to do because we're afraid of the failure, we're afraid of the rejection, but repel those who are not for you. This goes with dating as well. You know, if you try to create a dating profile that is attractive to all women, well, what you're doing is creating a bland, lackluster profile, because you know what's attractive to all people? Water. Mm-hmm. Water is attractive to all people. Water is bland. Water is beautiful and wonderful and life-giving, but it's bland. It has no flavor, right? If you market yourself as an orange juice, of course, I have to take it back to beverage because, hello, I'm Ella Parlor and that's all I can do, right? But some people are a hot tea. Some people are an orange juice. Some people are a champagne. Some people are a whiskey. That's fine. Stop trying to market yourself to be palatable to everyone. You are not water. You are complex. You are wonderful. You are beautifully made. And so once you can get in on that and be authentic with your message, don't be afraid of repelling the people who aren't for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I couldn't agree with that more about, you know, just showing up as your true authentic self. And because I see a lot of people fall into that trap where, you know, they try to put on a mask and pretend to be, you know, someone that they're not. And again, that goes across the board in so many different spaces. Again, dating, jobs, careers, business, and everything. But the reality is, it's just, you know, you'll probably get found out eventually. And no matter what you do, no matter what you say or how good you think you are, regardless of what you put out, someone is just simply not going to like it somewhere. And, you know, and sometimes, and I get it, sometimes it's hard where it's like, you know, if I look at my Apple Podcasts reviews, like the vast majority of them are positive reviews, you know, like 4 or 5-star reviews, and some nice things are really said. But then every now and then I get that one that just wants to leave me 1 star and then write me a paragraph long description as to why they didn't like my show. And I get it. Sometimes those negative reviews like hit a lot harder than even like the big batch of positive ones that you get. But at the end of the day, though, it's just I still know that what I'm doing still has value in people's lives. Hence why I have all those positive reviews. So it's just you're not going to please everyone. So just be who you are, and people will resonate. Or and what you have to put out there, especially if you're talking about like maybe struggles you've had. And you and I were talking about like all of these misadventures that we had in travel and whatnot. But someone else has probably experienced these too, or they're thinking about stepping into these roles. And so now maybe we just help them, bolster their confidence just a little bit more because we were willing to be authentic with ourselves and, share those stories.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And again, I want to echo, if there are any unaccompanied minors out there, please hit me up. I just want to talk to you. I just want to find you. I know there's thousands of you out there. So hopefully sharing this authentic message of growing up as a quote unaccompanied minor. I know Matthew Perry was, because he almost named his memoir Unaccompanied Minor. He talks about that in his chapter. He was like, why was I traveling alone as a child? Where were my parents? And I'm like, yeah, where were our parents? So I'm hoping that by sharing that piece of my story, I get to hear from someone else who could say, yeah, I traveled alone too. Where were you at, DFW? Where are those children? You're somewhere. So I'm hoping. And as far as the bad reviews, I keep saying my book isn't real until I get a bad review, because right now I only have 5-star reviews, and I know it's all my friends and family and they're so beautiful and wonderful and supportive, but I'm waiting for that scathing review on my book. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt, but then I'll know that it's real, because until I have that negative review of feedback, then it's like, well, did I really go ham with it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, by the way, I'm curious. I don't know if you actually mentioned, how did that whole situation with you and your brother in that big room like end? How did you find your way to your next flight? I don't know if we made it that far.
So we were both lucky and unlucky, because what they would do is they had these cots lined up so closely together that you could barely walk in between them. They also couldn't feed us, by the way, because of potential allergies. They were too afraid of one of the children having an allergy. So the only thing they would give us was an apple and water. That was all they would give us, and they would only do it on a small basis to make sure that we weren't choking or something. They were so afraid of the liability. But my brother and I were on cots, and we were holding hands across this little tiny aisle in between. And then they came and tapped us on the shoulder because our flight was ready. We were really lucky that we were headed to Charlotte, North Carolina, which has a lot of American Airlines flights. And so we were booked to be on the first American airline flight out to Charlotte, which was like a 4 or 5 in the morning flight. So we got a quick, nap, I guess. And then we left all the kids behind. But that's what would happen, is someone would come in, tap you on the shoulder. They had our names on the cot, like on a piece of paper. So they're looking for our names, like, hey, you Parlor kids. Okay, come with us. You're going, not home. We weren't going home. North Carolina was not our home. We were going to wherever our parents were shipping us off that time. But you're going away, away from this. Kitty jail is really what it was. Yeah, so I mean, things turned out fine. I would also like to say my grandparents, who were at the airport waiting for us, they got put up in a 5-star hotel because my mother, we got lost. I mean, my brother and I were quite literally lost at the airport. And my mother's in the travel space and is in the travel industry and has a little black book, a Rolodex of various executives from various Fortune 500 companies, including American Airlines. So she got a call when her children went missing at the airport, and it was a red alert. And so I go up to a woman, because when you're a child, you're like, who am I going to go up to? Like, I don't want to say we're lost. Someone's going to kidnap us, right? You're trying to be careful and look around. And so I finally found a woman who looked like she worked with the airport. And I just said, hi, we're lost. And she looks at us and she takes us by the hand. She says, come with me. We go to this customer service desk. I can hear my mother on the phone screaming. All I hear is yelling, yelling, yelling. And the customer service desk customer service agent is looking at me and my brother, and she goes, ma'am, I think I have them. I think I have them. That's all I hear her say. And I could hear my mother. So I knew it was my mom because I know her voice. She goes, I'm looking at them right now. But we had been missing for probably 3 hours before anybody found us. And that's why they have those big neon lanyards now. Because of children like us that got put on. Our person wasn't there waiting for us when we got off the plane like they were supposed to be. So when we got off the plane, I didn't know what to do. And instead of like asking a stranger, I was like, just keep walking till you find someone, which was probably not the best decision at DFW. It's a really busy airport. But yeah, so all is well. It all ended up fine. My grandparents got to stay in some 5-star hotel. My brother and I slept on a cot near the ground and froze our little booties off. But again, everything happens for you, not to you. It's all about what you decide to take away from every really painful experience. I believe we could take all of our pain and turn it into purpose if we do it right.
Absolutely agree. Well, I'm glad in the end everything turned out okay. So what I have for you next is, as we kind of start winding down here, another one of the things that I like to do with all my guests towards the end of the show is have my guests issue a challenge to our listeners and our viewers if people are watching on YouTube, because you and I shared some stories today. We shared some information today. But as I say, stories and information can only take our listeners and viewers so far. Action has to follow up on their end to go out there and do amazing things. So with that, what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
Do the hard thing. Now, for me, that hard thing is booking a flight to Japan. So I'm going to have to do that. But do the hard thing. Do that thing. If you find yourself going, I don't want to do it, but you keep thinking about it, it's probably a sign you need to do it. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So get over it. Do the hard things. You can do it. Try and look at failure as an opportunity to learn instead of something to hold you back.
All right. Outstanding. All right. So what I have for you next is my final 3. These are 3 fun questions. At least I like to think that they're fun questions that I also ask all my guests at the end of the show. So of course you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of these 3 questions is, and I'll also say that these are loaded questions, so brace yourself. But the first question is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
People don't like this answer, but I love Las Vegas. Las Vegas, Nevada is my favorite place in the whole world. And yes, I have traveled around the world and I still pick Las Vegas. If you cannot afford to go to Europe, I hope I don't get a mob after me for saying this. Having been to Paris and Rome and various museums and so forth, I can tell you that if you go to Las Vegas, it's very similar. They did a really great job replicating everything you see in Europe. I'm just saying, if you miss the Eiffel Tower, just go to Las Vegas. It's almost as real as The Good Thing when you consider the flight and time and all of that. So I love Vegas. You can, anything you want is possible there. And I love it for that. It never sleeps. Neither do I. And it's safe and it's in America. I love Las Vegas. But yeah, so Las Vegas is the answer. Is that strange? Has anyone ever answered that?
Actually, someone has. And so there really must be something to that place then, because the last guest that I had that said Las Vegas was a buddy of mine who is, he lives in Montana, and he is a backcountry like hunter who will spend like a week at a time, like deep in the wilderness somewhere, like hunting. And so when I asked him this question, I was almost sure he was going to take me like way, way, way out in the backcountry, like somewhere like far, far away from civilization. But he said, I tell you, man, yes, I love the wilderness, but Vegas, man, Vegas has my heart. So I'm like, maybe I should get back there, because I've been there before when I was in the Marine Corps. Except I was only 19 years old at the time, so I really couldn't do anything. So I'm wondering now if as an adult, maybe I should double back to it after hearing, you say it was your favorite as well as my one of my previous guests. So Must be something to it.
Highly recommend. There are so many flights that go there. You could have a lot of fun in 24 hours. It's just great. And I've gone alone several times. I love it. I really, really love Las Vegas.
All right, very good. So the next question that I have for you in this final three, it is, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Japan, we talked about it. So that's it for me. I mean, that's top of my list and you really have compelled me to start planning that trip. So I think I'm going to look at planning it for next spring. I'm saying it so that way I'll have to hold myself accountable. So I can be there for the cherry blossoms. But yeah, that's what I'm looking to do next year. That'll be my first 2025 trip that I start planning.
Very good. And like I said, definitely happy to help on that front. Now, if I can say one tip right off hand, make Kyoto part of your itinerary. Kyoto was my favorite city that I visited there. However, we were there for like 3 days. It was not long enough. There was so many amazing things to see in that city. So keep that in mind too, as you go about your planning. So Kyoto, that was my highlight from that trip. So, all right. And the third question that I have for you, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
Wow. Well, my favorite animal, I like snakes. I love all snakes. Um, I don't typically see them in the wild, but now that you ask that, when we think about animals that I've been able to see in the wild and touch and play with, I love koalas. I did not expect to fall. I'm not a big mammal person. I like reptiles. I like things that I like pets I don't have to pet, right? But koalas, they're just so sweet and chill. I don't know what's in those leaves they eat, but they got a Bob Marley type of personality, and I love it. They're just so chill and sweet, and they hug you, and they're so just wonderful and yummy and delicious. So I guess they're a marsupial, not a mammal technically, but
Right.
I do love my cold-blooded animals, but koalas do have my heart as well.
Well, you're in Texas, so you're probably bound to find some more and more snakes as you go about. And well, shoot, you might have also saw some gators. You told me you were just in Houston recently. I'm sure they're down there.
They have like a gator infestation. I was down in Galveston. They have like a gator infestation right now. So waters that people you normally can cross, they're like, don't cross the water. There are a bunch of gators up in there. And I got attacked by, you can't, I don't know if you could see them with all the filters I have, but for the first time in my life, I got attacked by mosquitoes in the face. So I got bit 7 times in the face, 4 times in the neck, probably about 40 times on my body. And that's with complete spray head to toe. They ate me alive. So the gators and the skeeters were out in Houston this weekend. It was rough.
Speaking of reptiles, the trail that I run, that I ran today before, hopping on the call with you, I'm always looking at the ground now because there's been a couple times now actually where I almost stepped on a coral snake. And again, for anyone who may not know what I'm referring to, coral snake is a highly venomous, dangerous creature. And you can tell because like its color pattern is red, black, and yellow. And if you have the colors red and yellow touching, that's how you identify it as a coral snake. Now, there's another snake similar called the king snake where red is touching black, and that one is not venomous. So knowing the difference is kind of, crucial, especially now that I've seen them in the wild. And I guess the saying goes, red on yellow will kill a fellow, red on black is a friend of Jack. So that's how you kind of remember. But it's just, yeah, I'm kind of like hyper aware now because I've seen like this powerful snake in the wild. That's what I'll call it. It's a powerful creature because it really is for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely stay safe. I mean, people really take for granted the fact that Southern California has some of the deadliest snakes in the world. So I definitely saw more rattlesnakes growing up in Southern California, with it being more deserty, not on the beach, but in the Inland Empire and in the high desert, we definitely have a lot of snakes. But definitely stay safe because as much as I love them, I don't want to find a wild snake. I want a domesticated one in my life.
All right. Very, very cool. And I would say that that's a first, Ella. I don't know if anyone's answered snakes to these questions before. And also, you kind of half answered with koalas, too. I don't think anyone said koalas either. At least I can't think so. Certainly not snakes, but so there we go. You got something original for this question. All right. Well, Ella, that's it. That's all the questions that I have for you today. But before we call it a day here, let's go over, how our listeners and viewers then connect with you. So, you're out there in the social media space. You got your book out right now, and then of course, you got your marketing business. So, yeah, how can we reach out and connect with you?
The easiest way to find me is ellaparlor.com. You could all the channels, I'm on them except YouTube. You might get me to go on YouTube, but I'm on most of the channels. So whatever one is your favorite, you could just go to ellaparlor.com and click away and then find whatever you want. My book, my podcast, my business, my social media, it's all on there for you.
All right, and I'll get everything linked up in the show notes for this episode. Or if we have viewers that are watching us talk on YouTube, they can find it in the description below. So it'll be all linked up there for them to go click and find everything. All right. Well, Ella, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. I mean, we just connected recently, but it's been great getting to know you so far. And I also just want to say, I just appreciate you and just, how you're showing up in the world. It's just you're putting out a lot of positivity out there on your social media. And of course, you're obviously adding a lot of value to your clients and those that have the privilege to work with you. So, yeah, I just wanted to tell you that. And thank you very much again for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Josh. The feeling is so mutual. I love what you're creating here. You are so easy to speak with, and I always do an inventory of people on one metric. Do we need more people like that or less people like that? And you absolutely are in the category of we need more people like you who are kind and instigating wonderful conversations. You're so empowering. And I'm so honored to have been a part of this. Thank you so very much. And you got to come onto my podcast. So I'd love to have you and learn more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd gladly do that for sure. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Ella. I appreciate it.